Hi, everyone. I'm Ina from Nihilus, and welcome to today's Fireside chat on Agentic AI and Treasury. I'm joined today by two incredible industry leaders. We have Mike Dion, the founder of F9 Finance, and Avichai Madele-Bacon, who leads our global sales at Nihilus. Over the next hour, Mike and Avichai will be exploring the practical applications of AI in Treasury and cover everything from what agentic AI actually means in financial context and how Treasury teams can apply AI to move from static reporting to strategic decision making. A little bit of housekeeping before we dive in. We will be hosting a live Q&A at the end of our session, but we do encourage you to drop any questions you might have into the Q&A box at any time throughout the chat. We'll get to as many as we can before we wrap up. Finally, don't worry about taking notes. We'll send out a follow-up email this coming Monday with a link to the full recording and the resources mentioned today. With that, I'll hand it over to Mike and Avichai to get us started.
Cool. Enough. Thanks so much for the intro. Everyone here on the call, it's great to be with you. And Mike, I'm so happy that we're doing this. So my long name in the bottom in the bottom corner can be tough to pronounce, but Kai works well, and I lead all the global sales over at Nihilus. I've been at the firm now for about 2 years, and I'm helping the majority of our new companies get up and running on the system, learn a lot about what it means to be using a cash management system like Nihilus that is AI native. And of course, understanding a whole load of the benefits that come of that as well, many of which we'll discuss today. Mike, how about a quick intro, and then we can dive in.
Sure thing. So excited to be with you all here today and talk about one of my favorite topics, agentic AI. So I'm Mike Dion. I am a senior finance leader at a Fortune 500 company in FP&A, and I'm also the founder of Mike's F9 Finance, where we work on finance automation and AI tools, everywhere from brand new startups all the way to mega cap companies like where I work. So excited to be here with you all today.
Cool. And one of the things that you were just mentioning now, which it's definitely going to be a focal point of the conversation that we're in, but it really is something that a lot of people are curious about is, and we're going to discuss this throughout the conversation. What does agentic AI mean and what does that do for us? But I think so many people are trying to work out how, as finance leaders, something of which you are, and I'm sure so many people with us today are as well, they're wondering how they can start making their treasury functions, and of course their finance functionalities in general, something that's more proactive. Now, in the space that we're in today, whether it be with constantly fluctuating interest rates, things that are changing all the time within the world of finance that we can't always control, people are often wondering how they're supposed to react to that change. And I think that's quite interesting that I love if we could touch on, maybe start there, Mike, is how can you get ahead of the curve? How can you find a way to actually be proactive in your finance and then also specifically within treasury?
So the biggest thing you need to do is to stop being in a situation where you constantly have different fires coming at you, where you're constantly just chasing. And the way to do that, and the way that agentic AI can help you, is by getting a lot of the small things off your plate, a lot of those small check-ins, a lot of those small touch points. I have in one of the courses I partner with Nihilus on, I have something called a cash movement alert. And what that does is it literally monitors your bank accounts. It's very easy to set up. It monitors all your bank accounts throughout the day. And if anything goes wrong, if you trigger thresholds that you define, it immediately messages you and anyone else who needs to know. So that does two things. First of all, it eliminates the task of someone having to go check. But second, it opens up the mental space for you to not have to think about it because you know if something happens, it's going to be flagged to you. And that mental space allows you the time, aside from the fact that you just don't have to check in the first place, it allows you the time and the mental space to focus on other things. And that's really one of the biggest benefits we don't talk about. Everyone says, hey, yeah, I saved, 5, 10, 15 hours from the automation. But the fact that you don't have all that sitting in the background of your mind is the easiest way to become proactive.
It's so interesting how this topic of AI isn't just helping you to automate those processes, but also, by leveraging AI agents, you're actually effectively deferring the work to somebody else entirely. So I love that point is it's reducing a mental burden as well, where oftentimes you'd find yourself so stuck in your way of trying to, ticking off a mental checklist of the things that I have to get done today. And AI agents will easily help you to actually limit and shorten that list. It's interesting on that note of AI agents. I'm wondering kind of generally, how do you find that AI agents help finance leaders to say, navigate everything that is taking place in today's world? We find that there is so much economic uncertainty, whether it be with what's going on constantly across the world, and that of course affects people financially and affects organizations in the same way. I'm curious to get your opinion on how AI can actually be used in the agents that you're discussing there, like those cash movement alerts that can help finance leaders to navigate those economic uncertainties.
So there's three different buckets I really see it in. You have monitoring, you have research, and you have the third one just went out of my head. I'll talk about the first two first. So from a monitoring standpoint, you have the ability to get those quick indicators again without you researching. So I've got some agents I've done that track RSS feeds, right? You can connect them to things like Google Finance, and if keywords pop up, it'll alert you. So it takes that monitoring step off you. For the researching standpoint, there's some really great tools that can do deep research. They can look through academic materials, they can look through libraries, they can scan faster than a human ever could. And they're going to be able to pull all that information to you with citations, with sources that can help you digest and understand what's happening out in the marketplace. And boy, that third one is just not coming back to me, but it was really profound. So as soon as that comes back to me, I'll let you know. But I mean, definitely, the fact that they're on 24/7, right? That's the biggest difference between an AI tool and a human working the role is that they're there 24/7. They don't take a lunch break. If something is happening in the economy, they're going to get that information to you faster, and you don't have to sit down and worry about whether you're missing something.
I think that specific point is arguably the most, it's the most profound point in the sense that we often find that human intelligence can only provide so much, right? So my news feed, whether it be on my social media, on the news itself, or in any other realm, is going to be limited to a specific set of data that I can't necessarily control, meaning there could be an economic uncertainty or a change that I might not even be aware of. And these AI agents can actually not only replace the thing that I would typically go and do, so searching for that economic change or whatever specific limitation I might find that could affect the way that I work. But in the same way, it can also go and see what I'm not seeing. And I think that's a really smart
Yeah,
access.
you just brought it back to me. Scenario planning is the third bucket. Thank you for that. Yeah, so unbiased or light biased scenario planning, right? Because there will tend to be things that just in our day-to-day role we're seeing and we're more focused on, but AI can help you not only come up with the scenarios, but even at this point model the scenarios, look at your data and model scenarios of things you wouldn't even have thought of. And it can attack those in a less biased way where we might have the thing we think is most serious or the thing that we think just could never happen, and the AI tool will really challenge us on that, model the scenario and show us like, hey, you're not thinking clearly about this. And that is a great way to gut check the human intelligence side and just say, where are my blind spots? Because you can get AI to really not have blind spots. It's never a replacement, but it's a tool, it's an add-on kind of supplementing yourself to give you that kind of 360-degree view you might not always have.
I couldn't agree with you more. Do you know, it's funny, it leads me on to the next thing that I was curious to get your two piece on. If effectively, if you're building out good models and the data you're bringing in is being analyzed correctly, then at the end of the day, you'll be able to make the correct decisions, or at least the most correct strategic decisions, in this case with your finances. Now, I always find that if you have the AI in the right place, seeing what you're not typically seeing, and in addition to that, and making sure that the models are being built out correctly, automated to save time, and all those different various benefits that AI brings, I'm wondering what those positive and negative consequences and implications of the AI would be when it gets to actually making the decisions around my finances.
So I'll start with the negative, which is starting to rely on it too much. So my rule with any AI tool, I always tell people and teach people 80/20, right? It's the classic rule, but you want the AI to give you 80%, to give you the bulk of the production of the work, of the scenarios, of kind of the decision points you need to consider. And you should never go beyond 80% with whatever you're doing. If you're having it help you write a memo, it should do 80% and you polish the last 20%. if there's a strategic decision that needs to be made, the human aspect, the creativity, the ability to bring different ideas and new ideas together, because AI can't really create something new, which is putting things that exist together in different ways. You don't want to lose that. You shouldn't push to go past that 80% because you really want to bring in, that's what you're there for. You want to add your value to that. You want to be strategic. That last 20%, the really critical piece of the strategy should always stay on the human. And there's a risk over time that it just gets too easy and you just start giving more and more trust over the AI tools. It's great to have more and more processes to the AI tools, but never hand 100%. I think that's a huge risk on that side. The
It's
pros
funny,
really.
just to quickly butt in on that point. It's funny how the negatives are the points that people don't always discuss. But at the end of the day, if you are entirely reliant on AI, then there's no need for you, in that capacity. And everybody's wondering in today's economy, will AI replace me? It's a separate conversation that we won't necessarily get onto now, but I often think about how I can make sure that AI doesn't replace me. And it's exactly what you're saying. It's saying, let the AI do what is mundane and monotonous and repetitive, and let me focus on where I can go and add that strategy. And I'm sure that's going to lead on to these positive points that you're getting to now.
Yeah, and I don't know who to credit for this. Someone else said this, not me, but it's you won't be replaced by AI. You'll be replaced by someone using AI better than you.
There you go.
And I think I move and live by that philosophy of, come in and find ways to add the most value. Um, but on the pro side, as you think about the strategy, is AI tools can challenge you. AI tools can point out blind spots.
I think we've lost Mike there for a second. And I'll just check in and see that you're still hearing me.
Yeah, yeah, I'm here.
No problem. We'll give him
Mike, I
a
think
minute.
we lost connection. Oh, there you are. If you can repeat the last 10 seconds, that'd be great.
Am I back?
You
You're
are.
back. You're here.
Excellent.
We're seeing you.
Excellent. Sorry, my Zoom is still saying I'm not. That's fun. So when you're doing strategy, when you're doing that type of planning work, having the ability, again, always that 360 view, the things that you're missing, the things that you're not seeing, and their ability to pull in just tremendous amounts of industry information, more than you could ever hope to read in a day. I mean, they can pull in thousands of pages of research papers and white papers and give you those perspectives for then you to make that final decision. The ability to process data and to synthesize data is the best pro of all. I mean, it's a cliff notes on your entire business and industry, and no human can keep that amount of information in their brain. Still, though, 80/20, handing it back to the human to make that final decision. And that's really, really a huge benefit of these tools.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And it's also unique how you can use so many different functionalities, so many different AI functionalities throughout your day to enhance each specific task. And then within those, find the ways to, of course, act yourself and be your own strategic decision maker with all the data in front of you. And that's mainly what it's providing. It's saying, here's full visibility. Here's what you didn't have before, the ability to make any specific decision. AI might give you a certain recommendation, but then you have the way of creating influence on top of that.
Absolutely.
Now,
Now I'm interested in understanding kind of from your perspective on a more tactical level, as we think about something that every company is doing and has a lot of data and has a lot of moving pieces that no one can keep in their head. Cash flow forecasting.
sure.
Where do you kind of see it going to bring these AI tools into something that's so sensitive, so it can be so challenging if a mistake is made? Like, how do you see AI playing a role in that?
I actually will quote somebody that I heard recently in the space, a treasurer from a seriously quite large organization in the States, mentioned that the the lack of understanding of what truly exists in your ERP, but similarly also exists per your actuals, will never really match, and you'll find yourself forecasting per the wind. Meaning, you might assume a customer will pay you at X date, for example, today on the 29th of January. Your actuals show something else entirely, as I'm sure every finance individual knows and experiences all the time. And you're not always able to understand how one piece of data relates to the reality. Now, AI can do things, and it's funny because Nihilus, of course, is really quite prone at this as well and does a great job at doing this. But in building out cash flow forecasts that both integrate to all forms of data to provide that visibility, but then also use AI to say, what do I understand should happen? And what do I typically see actually happening on the day to day? Then, as a treasurer, you can actually make the decisions based off of not just what I'm being told, but also what I see. And I think that relates back to the way of making strategic decisions. So when teams think about how they implement AI into something that involves cash flow forecasting, typically I would say make sure that it broadens your visibility. Make sure that it also provides you with different types of visibility. So your visibility into one system, but also into what happens in reality in the case of both your banks for your actuals and also your ERP data or your AR, AP data, which might be held elsewhere. Then at the same time, taking it a step forward, I would say make sure that AI can come and help you make those decisions around your cash. So if I'm thinking about where I'm going to be tomorrow and I can project where the cash will be next week, next month, or next quarter, then the question is, what can I do with the data that's presented in front of me? And what are the strategic moves that I can go and take for the company? Typically, you'll find that AI will actually allow you to think in a way that you might not have thought before. So we often find that individuals who use Nihilus are then able to locate idle cash they didn't even understand existed in their systems before. They didn't realize the extent to which it was idle. They're able to move that cash to sweep accounts, investment accounts, MMAs and MMFs to make a various different selection of enhanced decisions and enhanced choices around that data that they have. So it's visibility top one, and then the decision making above that.
Oh, that's really fascinating. And it's I'm interested to hear, as you think about what you're saying about keeping liquidity moving and kind of those decision points and letting the teams really focus. Um, Humans and liquidity and cash management aren't necessarily predictable in the traditional sense, right? It's not like I'm a SaaS business and I have X number of customers and we're going to generate X amount of income on a day, but my payments are very variable. So how are you thinking about using AI for these things like liquidity that can change so much on a daily basis and don't always have patterns the way we'd think
Right.
about them?
It's an amazing question. And AI does an amazing job of also tracking things like seasonality, right? So wherever there is a pattern to track, AI will naturally go and track it. But what it does on top of that, and this is where machine learning adds on to the AI, and this is what really gets fascinating, is it can start to broaden that whole picture and that perspective and say, not only do I understand what's likely to change, I can also learn from what the AI the machine learning can learn from what the AI predicted, and then each time go and improve. Meaning, the longer you have AI and machine learning as a technological capacity in your workspace, you'll find that the results given to you become increasingly better. Now, in the sense of liquid in the on the point of liquidity tracking and liquidity management generally, you might have a specific policy around your cash. So, I mentioned idle cash before. You might make a certain limit or a target on cash. For example, in a certain bank account, I want between $1 and $2 million in that account at any point in time, with that threshold built around it. Maybe I'll have a buffer to 10% going in each way. And then you'll see with your AR coming in and your AP going out exactly how your cash is interacting with that specific bank account. So because you're forecasting the data to that bank, you can then say, as a result of what I'm seeing, I actually have cash that I can go and play around with. When you use that AI to help you understand where your cash is going to be later on, then you can start making the interesting liquidity decisions. So, how should I move my cash into investments or paying down debt or a loan, right? Or separately, just thinking forward and putting that into some sort of a even monitoring your risk better and using it for the sake of FX. There are so many different ways that you can actually put that liquidity to use based on the AI, and then the machine learning on top of that, which is all a part of the AI conversation, is going to say tomorrow the tip, the insight, and the advice that I gave you yesterday would have been improved on because we would have learned from how we acted, and now we'll be able to change.
It's something we don't talk enough about with AI tools because you don't experience it if you're just using ChatGPT, but the ability of the tools to learn and improve. And we don't really talk about that massive benefit enough with the tools that most people are interacting with. So that's really great. want to go back to something you mentioned though about risk. Obviously, Treasury brings some of the biggest risk to any company because cash is king. But how do you see AI playing a role? Like, where could it introduce more risk, and where can it actually help us and address and reduce risk?
Yeah, it's such a good question. I mean, the whole concept of risk can be defined in multiple different ways, right? So it's all about what specific risk are we defining here? If it's the way that you're working generally, it goes back to the point you mentioned before, right? So leaning into that AI too much can actually sometimes cause more harm than good, right? You may find yourself in a situation whereby you're not really processing the decisions that are being made, and sometimes those decisions that are being made might be in your favor, other times they might not be. So you have to make sure that the short term goals and the long term goals meet each other. And the decisions that you're making based on the AI insights you're receiving and those automations that are built around it are actually to value. So that's the negatives. The positives I actually see in the way that AI can enhance the risk management strategies within treasury operations would mostly be put the mundane tasks to bed. So automate everything that can be, right? And then leave your brain to do what brains were designed to do. Not to necessarily, in the case of Treasury, looking at your cash flow reports and tagging or categorizing each transaction. Let that get automated because that's monotonous, repetitive work. And the AI and the machine learning can see each time the same transaction comes up the next time and can tag it automatically. But I think it gets really interesting when you start thinking about how to actually go and put that cash to use. And then you're starting to think about risk management correctly within AI. You're thinking about the decisions that I go and make, the way I interact with my treasury can actually get a real highlight when you start putting the AI forward.
And such a big point I make a lot about moving finance functions from a cost center to adding value,
Right.
because we're spending a lot of money and cost managing the mundane tasks, but we can add a lot of value. FP&A teams can add strategic value. Treasury teams can lower costs. It can bring in revenue from available cash. Accounting teams it can reduce costs from future compliance issues and legal issues. There's a lot of ways these teams can add value if they're not just running the day-to-day processes all the time.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I mean that's where automation really comes in, right? So I think automation is this huge benefit that we're still figuring out. So, I was talking to a colleague earlier today, and she said to me, I don't remember a world before ChatGPT, right? The things that can be automated should be automated because it lets us rebrand, it lets us think in a smarter way, and it actually lets us focus on what really should be done. My question to you is, when I think about automation, sometimes I think about accuracy, right? So I may be doing it faster, but am I doing it better? And I'm thinking, when looking at AI and the role that it plays in anything around finance, whether it be the FP&A, the treasury, reconciliations, do you often see, and maybe you can also tell me about how and share with me some of your day to day as a finance professional, how do you see AI interacting with the concept of accuracy? Do you typically find it something that improves it or something else?
I have a long roundabout way of answering this question, in that the automation should be your last step. And if you do this correctly, that's where you do get better accuracy. And the path is eliminate, simplify, automate. The first thing you have to do is eliminate things that shouldn't be being done in the first place. We all have those. I would be hard pressed to find a company that there's not something that could be eliminated. It's one of my favorite stories. At a prior company I worked at, we were doing 30 month end reports. And I challenged the team and I said, I want you to pick 15 of these you think no one's reading and not send them and see what happens. Of the 15 reports that the team was spending time on, one was asked about. The other 14, nobody even noticed they weren't produced. Right. And that's an extreme example of a team I had just taken over, but those kind of things are happening everywhere where you're doing something because it's always been done and no one's actually using it. So eliminate first, then simplify. If you automate a bad process, you get a really fast bad process or an even more dangerous process. So simplify your processes, understand your processes, and make a process that works. And only then, once you're working on the right things in an efficient, simple way, then you automate. And when you do it that way, you see massive improvements in accuracy because you're running a clean process. You're letting the tools do what they do best. You've thought about the process. You're bringing the humans in at the right times. And from there, 99% of the time, the process only improves, but
Yeah, I
not
agree.
if you haven't gotten the first steps right first.
It goes back to that expression I hear quite often when people get nervous to implement a system. Are they come sometimes come with, a really messy database, an ERP that's not looking in shape at all, just a whole load of missing data, and they'll come in and they'll say garbage in, garbage out. Meaning, if you haven't cleaned up the process itself or cleaned up the database or your ERP or whatever it might be, and then you go and automate a workflow, you're just going to get garbage out faster. So before leveraging AI, I think the main tip to anybody ever is to make sure that your data is clean. Because then once you're automating that process, you're working with what should work very well anyway. But I definitely agree that just to echo that point, that if there's a lot of garbage in, then you're just going to get faster garbage out.
And in an AI world, to expand on your point, data is the biggest limiter. You look around and 80% plus of CFOs want AI tools rolled out in the next year. And less than 20% of finance teams report really having true AI processes beyond asking ChatGPT questions in place. Why? Two reasons. One is comfort and training with the tools, right? Which is something that companies can solve for with training. Part two, though, is the data. And data continue, AI tools are data-driven statistics machines, really, at the end of the day. And if you don't have clean, structured data, it's impossible. And everything relies on you understanding and cleaning your data. And that's the limiter that everyone should be fixing right now if they want to be using AI tools.
Yeah, I completely agree. Now, just thinking about, some of the places where I think about the day to day about how people leverage Nihilist and how people leverage AI within Nihilist, and of course also our automations. One of the biggest, maybe unspoken truths is that your treasury can be in great shape, but it might not always match the accounting data. It might not always match what's needed on the accounting side. I'm curious to know on your end, how do you find that AI can also assist in, the most important things that go on day to day that affect everyone? They affect treasury, they affect FP&A, they affect accounting, with things like, closing of the books. How does AI come in and really come and shape up those processes?
So it's actually one of the best use cases for AI because, as I said, AI tools are largely statistics machines. And what do statistics machines do best? They find outliers. And they can, the tools where they're at now, they can discern if something is the same, if it's a little bit different, right? It's those things like we've dealt with if you're trying to work in Excel and you have a list of accounts and someone accidentally typed a comma or an extra space in one of them. Excel is going to flag that as not matching, right? Power Query is going to flag that as not matching unless you do something with, making it fuzzy. AI can tell it matches, and that's a huge leap forward. So it can tell what is not an outlier because it can tell what matches, and it can tell what is an outlier. So as you think about reconciling a treasury data set with an accounting data set, you no longer have to worry about these month-end reconciliations between missing commas or spaces or account differences or a day or two off on timing based on when the system's recognized it. AI can handle all that. But they can also tell when something is truly out of whack and it can raise that up. So instead of going through 100% of your data set, you're now going through 10% of your data set. You're reconciling the last 10%. You're bringing the humans in to sit down and focus on exactly what needs to be. And oh, by the way, you can also track this throughout the year. In the same course I mentioned earlier that I developed with Nihilist, I have one about daily liquidity management, and it will actually look every single day through your accounts. It can look at your accounting data, look at your treasury data automatically, and every single day it's going to flag issues to you.
Mm.
So not only can it handle this at month end, you're doing your month end before you ever get to month end. And when it's not the chaos of month end, you're more likely to actually even fix the source issue if it's a recurring issue. Because at month end, you come up with this. I have one of them, 20 things on the list that you're going to fix next month end. And then you forget by the time month end's done because it was so crazy and
Right.
everyone's exhausted. But when you're
Right.
finding it out week 2 of the month, you might actually have some capacity. You can fix it at the time.
It
So it goes
it
back to the
almost
24
flags that
7
point.
nature.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I agree. And it almost flags that point again, which is about, the AI can really provide you with two things. One is that visibility. So to make your decisions in week two as opposed to the end of week four, right? But then also it gives you control. It allows you to say, automate those specific tasks that don't necessarily need my intervention. But when I get back to that idea of control, I can think about how I want to go and adapt and change and influence the data that I have in front of me. Now, it takes me to a question that I often think about, and I think plenty are nervous about it in the space as well, which is when finance teams and finance individuals think about moving from their Excels and the manual work that they've typically been doing, the step forward into AI and automation can often be quite scary. That's something that we hear from CFOs and finance leaders all the time, that they're not sure if they want the data to be held and controlled by something that isn't their own people who know Excel off by heart. And of course, as somebody who's doing this day to day, I'm curious to hear your take, and I'm sure later on we'll hear this in the Q&A. But how can finance teams actually maintain that control, right, whenever they are looking to work with any form of AI driven based automation? So what can they hold on to?
It it is a big change. And I think the first thing to acknowledge is this is one of the biggest changes we've ever gone through as an industry. I mean, this is as big, if not bigger, than going from paper spreadsheets to Excel, which was as scary to everyone as it is now, right? Like this is not the first time this has happened to our profession. Um, People thought it was the end of the world when we went from paper to computers, and no one wanted to trust the computers. And I think it's to acknowledge that reality, like we're fine, right? Certainly things changed and it was hard and it was a hard transition, but we're fine and we've done this before. It's just it's a different set of tools sitting on top of that. Um, but this goes back to process redesign, right? And deciding in that process where a human is needed and separating process from the exceptions and the decisions, because what you need to focus on is the exceptions. Humans should spend their time on the exceptions. The base process should not need that intervention. So you need to design those guardrails, design those kind of what you say in the AI world, human in the loop, where the machine stops and asks for help. You need to separate the bulk of the transactions that go just fine and don't need anyone to touch them, the small supplier payments, the money just coming in and out of operating accounts and escrow accounts, those small movements that don't really move the needle and are pretty recurring
Yeah.
from the exceptions. And don't give up control on the exceptions. Don't try to automate the exceptions. That's what the humans are there for, is to handle the exceptions. And to try, most importantly, the most important part that is missed, to make the exceptions not happen again where you can. Right. Spend the time on that to just keep improving it. But that's what you need to be doing as you think about this, is improving the process. You do have to have the mindset change to give up control. Just like we had to stop writing in pencil on our spreadsheets and go to Excel or Lotus 123, if anyone remembers that. We have to give up that control, and we do have to have a mindset shift. But don't give up control on the stuff that really matters. And you shouldn't.
I think probably we'll find that, just as human nature is, what people care about, people will continue to do. Um, there's nothing more exciting in the finance space than making those strategic decisions that make sense for you and other executives. But there's probably nothing more boring than logging into your bank account, right? So to take two different extremes, right, one process can be simplified or automated or entirely replaced, and another should stay within your control. So I do echo that, and I very much agree. And I think at the same time, when you think about adoption of AI and how people then want to change the way that they navigate their day to day to use AI more and more, that's probably the pattern as well, is that people are saying, I want to control what I will forever want to control. There's no reason why those specific things should change. But in the same way, you could say that those working, pen to paper 30, 40 years ago, or maybe less, maybe that's too far gone for me. But those who moved on to the Excels are probably going to say afterwards, once getting onto AI, they would have replaced the same processes again and again. And later on in 20 years' time, when there's the next revolution, they'll probably change similar processes again and leave the strategic decision making to themselves. But then when thinking
Exactly.
about things like adoption, I'm the curious one. I've got questions which I'm just flowing at you. But I sometimes think in the eyes of the CFO, So in the specific in this the specific mindset of an individual who is making those decisions around cash, they're definitely going to agree with you and say simplify the processes that can be, but what should the approach be? So how should the CFO or the any finance executive approach the idea of simplifying these processes with AI, or when implementing actual AI solutions?
It is it is a cultural shift because this is not the way most companies run. And there's a lot of, especially in a lot of changes, there's a lot of individuals who will hold on tight to their processes. So there's a two-part approach. There's the easy, smiley, happy part, and then there's the tougher part. And you'll rarely not have to have both. The easy part is create the culture, enable people to do it, because a lot of times we forget that we're the ones creating the complexity through some of our asks. So you have to create an open culture where people can come tell you that there's issues, but also you have to sell and create the culture in the organization that this is a benefit and show people why it's going to be great for them. And you have to show people the benefits to their work life, that they get to do the cooler work. You said not logging into the bank accounts, doing the strategic
Mm,
work.
right.
That's going to work for 80% of the organization. Overgeneralizing, but 80 to 90%, that's going to get them along. There's going to be a subset in every organization who will not change the processes and will cling tighter and tighter to them. You also have to, on the flip side, not be afraid to just rip the band-aid off. And as a leader, force the processes in. Once you've made sure you're not the reason the process is inefficient, because a lot of us as leaders have made that mistake. I've made that mistake. I think we've all made that mistake where we accidentally created the complexity for no reason. But you have to not be afraid to also just push the last 10% to automation and not try to get everybody on board. And that's the biggest thing that I've seen. People will get hung up and entire automations will fail because of that last 10%. And you can't let that happen.
It's really like a almost like a division of labor. So once every specific person did their thing, and now AI is doing 90%, you don't want to get blocked off at that last piece. You need everyone getting involved to make sure that the factory line can move the way it always has done. And it makes me wonder how people will be, resistant to that, if people would ever be resistant to that change. I sometimes think about why people say no to AI and why people say no to automation. And it's kind of always puzzled me because the statistics show it, and people always find that the results are often better when automating. So, of course, yes, you're saving time and potentially putting headcounts to more strategic maneuvers each day. But whether it be in finance or pretty much in any specific industry, adoption for AI is typically so high because people just see that it works. The question is, how do we persuade those who are resistant to change to, get on the bandwagon and join everybody else?
You have to go to people's kind of go back to like marketing, right? Which is an area that finance professionals, a whole industry tend to not be the strongest at. First of all, make friends with marketers. I found a lot of benefit. I learned so much about persuasion from actually supporting marketing as a business function. Make friends with marketers. It's great, but start with health and wealth, right? You will. How can we get you to work less? How can we get this to get you promoted by being an adopter? How can we get this to make your life better in the areas you care about? And sell and persuade. And still, it will not work on everybody, but showing people the benefits to them as a person, not them as a worker, that's the way to make a lot of the transition work. To the point about the better work, the more accurate work, the faster work. Um, if you're going to sell, if you're going to get people over the line who are kind of on the edge, that's how you do it, is selling to them as people, not them as their.
Yeah, it's funny because at Nihilus, what we really see very often is that if there is a specific stakeholder in a conversation who is nervous about implementing any part of our AI system, the typical way of actually helping them make that step forward is showing them that they still have the ability to well, it goes back to that earlier point, but they have autonomy, they have control. So, stakeholder buy-in and just getting hold of those who are valuable in any organization and saying, although you might be resistant, try this out, see how it might actually really help you day to day, typically comes from the fact that they say, regardless of how quickly it works, regardless of how much it boosts the accuracy, I just want to know that if I click a button, it still belongs to me. And I think that's so imperative when it comes to finance because who then the Excel guru, the finance leader knows their numbers better, right? It's the accountants, it's the finance pros, it's the treasurers, it's the FP&A experts. It's people like yourself who really understand Excel. So to come in and take that away is, to take candy from a baby, right? There's no need or reason to necessarily go to do that. But at the same time, if you can provide them with the automated cash flow forecast and the automated insights, but also allow the individual to click on a button and say, you can actually change it if you want. Like you have that ability to, that's when I think you really get the buy-in because eventually they'll say, I did click on that button and I did choose to make another decision. But the thing that the AI suggested might have even been better or equally as good, but it did it for me 10 times as quickly. And I think that goes back to the same point that you mentioned before.
And that's how it should work. It's AI not as the owner, it's AI as a partner and as a tool, right? This is a very fancy Excel. This is not a human sitting at a desk. And managing that distinction, letting everybody do what they do best, which we organize that way, right? We let CPAs do the accounting, right? We let salespeople do business development. We put people in the roles where they're most effective, and AI's role in being most effective is pattern recognition and outliers and running 24/7 to just watch and consolidating data. There's these things it's better at than we'll ever be at. So put it in its right job.
I completely agree. I completely agree. I think maybe to round it off, I've got, well, at least only for mine, I've got one last question, which is when thinking about AI, both within finance and of course generally, maybe you can even share with what you hear in the finance space and what you hear from your peers and colleagues. What is the mindset shift that people are going to have to do? Let's even say specifically to keep things to topic, but specifically in finance, that they need to do around AI. So do people think AI is going to replace? Do people think it's going to empower you? Do people think it's going to do something else entirely? What do you typically hear in the industry?
I hear a lot of AI is going to replace me, but I hear that from people who haven't really used the tools. From people who, so I'll give an example for like the way I work and I've challenged my team is we're doing things with AI we didn't even know how to do before. I am personally building dashboards. I did not know how to do that before. I knew the concept of a dashboard, but I didn't know how to code a dashboard.
Right.
And now it's doing that for me. So there's, I'd say, half the people who are looking at this and going, I can do anything now. Like if I can structure it and I can understand the process and what I need to get done and iterate, because iteration is huge, I can do anything.
Yeah.
I can write marketing copy, I can do coding, things I could never do before. The other half are sitting there saying, my specific job, my buttons I click and my processes, AI can do that. I'm going to be replaced. That second mindset of what more can I do now? How can I elevate is just so beneficial. And those two mindsets are really how I'm just seeing everyone kind of split off. But the mindset saying I'm going to be replaced, they're not using AI tools. So are you seeing something similar? Are you seeing something different?
So what I see typically, and I see this from plenty of prospects who come look at Nihilist and then come and get on board with us, is you're either scared of it because maybe you've researched it to a degree, but it's really about getting your feet wet and really diving in. And the others are saying, without it, I'm left behind. So to stay ahead of that curve, and it all comes back to that first thing that we started about is being proactive and not reactive. Those who are reactive, I think, are going to struggle as AI picks up more and more across all industries and organizations, because it will eventually be able to do so much of what we do day to day. But if you can learn to use the AI in a way that boosts your workflows, probably changes them, You'll have a pivot in your day to day, but for the better, and in the long term, exponentially. You'll probably find, and I think I hear this, I mean, I hear this a huge amount, that AI in the years to come is going to be the way we work, the way we think. But it's always going to be AI did this amount, and then the new 100% of my working day that gets unlocked because of AI will be things we never knew possible before.
All right,
And
folks,
that's really
thank you so
exciting.
much for sharing your insights. We have a bunch of questions. Whoever wants to take it first is more than welcome. I'll just read it out for you. So the first one is when you talk about AI and forecasting, how do you make sure that the math behind the forecast is accurate? AI is good in explaining and summarizing, but it's not an engine which can be reliable with calculations.
Mike, you want to take this or should I?
I can take this one. So that entire statement was true even 6 months ago, and it is no longer really true even on conventionally available tools. So when AI tools started having reasoning capabilities, and they don't reason like humans, but when they started having reasoning capabilities and the ability to do coding, they are now extremely accurate. So if I go back 6 months, it is true. You were having hallucinations left and right. You go back to like GPT-4, early fours or GPT-3, definitely. You had hallucinations. You could ask it a basic math question, it would answer you incorrectly. As you started getting into the higher GPT-4s, as you started into GPT, especially 5, and they all have the ability to do thinking and reasoning. They all have calculation engines. They can all run Python. It's almost perfect. I'd say 99% accuracy I'm getting back. And the best part is they can now reproduce the work and they can explain the work. So one of the best things to do is if you ask it for a forecast, if you did this 6 months ago and you asked for a forecast, it was going to kind of give you an answer unrelated to the work it just provided you. If you ask it to explain a forecast now, it's going to go back and show you the exact code it ran, the exact calculations, the exact assumptions, methodology, and it's going to be able to explain all that. So this is something where it's coming so tremendously far so quickly, and you can actually get it to prove out its own work. So a much higher degree of confidence with the newer models coming up.
Thank you, Mike.
Yeah.
That's a very common concern. Abichai, would you like to add to that? We also have a couple of more questions, just as an FYI.
I think Mike's done a great job at answering that, but I'll only add to it that because systems and AI today, but focusing specifically on the systems that take in your bank data, your ERP data, and data points from various other integral parts to your finance setup, you gain enough visibility to really understand what's changing, why, and how. Meaning, if you look back at forecasting per the question, where you may have put something into GPT-3 7, 8 months ago, and it only had a limited scope of information. When you put it into an AI first system that's taken the whole array of data that it's got from one place, it's not just doing what GPT-5 is able to provide, but it's also scanning from here and from there and from the next place to make sure that every single touch point it can get access to is referred back to in the data. So it can actually really quite nicely build out those reports, forecasts using various different formulas, etc. In actually really quite a nice way.
Thank you, Avichai. Another person is asking, are there any best practices for training finance team on using AI effectively?
Oh, that's a good one. Maybe I'll kick it off with this one. So especially for those who are resistant to change, sometimes having your hand held can be really valuable. Now, linking it back to systems, you'll find this across the majority of products in the space like Nihilus. Typically, you'll have an onboarding team, an implementation manager, a customer success team. Now, those individuals are there to hold your hand. The point of which is we increase adoptability. So we help show you the way to get up and running on an AI first system and then bring in everybody else from your organization. And we typically see that 1 to 5 people will be the initial users on Nihilus within the first, say, 30 to 60 days. By the end of the first year, they could be at 30 to 50 because it's so common that if you have the right help with you, you can actually skyrocket in user usability. That being said, at the same time, there are plenty of tools that exist online that can actually show you really quite nicely how to go and use different AI tools, whether it be GPT, Gemini, Claude, etc., Cursor, and the like. You can actually do so much research on with a quick YouTube video as to, how to really get up and running on those on those different systems.
And what a better opportunity to mention our Delta, which is a free resource for you guys to jump into the 101 of Treasury, sorry, AI in Treasury, and learn from folks like Mike and others, everything you need to know about best practices and how to get started. Lastly, we have another question.
I think, by the way, I think I just saw now in the chat, there's the link that's just been put down there to the Delta itself. So if there's
Yes.
anybody in the chat who's just seen that link, feel free to go click on it and check us out because it's really kicking off.
All right, last question, unless anyone else would like to raise another one. How do products like Nihilus work with an existing TMS? Are you guys replacing a product or are you just layered on top of a TMS?
It's a really good question. So in the space of who needs and who purchases Nihilus, there are two different categories. There are those who see us and use us as their own TMS. Now we have functionalities in the core treasury space from your visibility to your reports, your forecasts. We have things that are available for various different reconciliations. We've got payment modules hitting the market, liquidity optimization layers, and of course, Nihilus AI throughout the whole thing. Now, plenty will use us as their own TMS, and there are other organizations who use a legacy system who then say on top of that legacy system, I'm not able to actually get everything I need from that anymore because technology has developed so rapidly and so well. Therefore, I want to have a Nihilus on top of that. So they use a system like ours and oftentimes use Nihilus on top of various different legacy systems, whether it be to pull that data from the legacy system and use our AI to manage liquidity directly through Nihilus, or eventually to move away from that system and exist solely as Nihilus does itself. But it really can apply to both. So you can use us on your own, and you can, of course, also use us with another system as well.
Perfect. All right. I'd like to thank everyone for joining. Once again, remind everyone that this recording will be sent to you over email on Monday. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Mike, thank you so much for the time. It was great to
It's been a
speak.
pleasure.
Enough, thanks for organizing this, and I hope everyone enjoyed.
Pleasure.
Take care,
Bye,
everyone.
everyone.
Have a good day.